Okay, wanted to talk about Chapter 8, okay, and word identification and reading fluency. Okay, let's start with some things. When you test word reading and word identification and reading fluency, here are some things. This chapter is not super involved. I'm going to cut it down to the stuff that you need to know because we're getting to a point in the semester where you almost are in the need to know, not into the fluffy stuff. So, stuff you need to know. When you are testing word level reading, word recognition, or fluency, it has to be timed. Why? If I don't time the test, the students will take their time to try to figure out what the words are. So, if I am phonetically decoding a word and I'm struggling through it, and I guess it correctly through that phonetic struggle, does that really mean that that word is in my working memory? Is it in my pool, in my sight words? No. So it doesn't accurately depict where the student is. Nearly all traditional word identification tests put together word recognition with phonetic decoding. It has to be timed and separate, okay? Now, students can guess correctly without context and never know what the word means. So they may be able to read it, but they may not understand what they're reading, okay? There's a big gap between word level reading and understanding what the word means. So when you're assessing a child, you need to be sure that they are guessing, not that they are guessing, is you want to eliminate the guessing. So you want to make sure that they are reading words, they know that what the word means and how to use it in context. So this statement, the use of time tabs helps minimize concerns for variability and issues within testing because it better estimates the size of their vocabulary and the size of their sight word vocabulary. So that's why we need to time. Now, word recognition and word identification. Remember, those are different, not the same. On page 203 on that chart, although none of the following are 100% reliable, they provide a good general idea about which words a child has in their sight word vocabulary. Okay, the child can get the word correct in context, but not in isolation. Okay, so they're guessing at that point. The child pronounces a particular word inconsistently. They're guessing. It takes the child a second or longer to respond to the word. Guessing. The child pronounces the word slowly. Guessing. The child self-corrects. Guessing. The child pauses. Guessing. The child pronounces the word with at least one unusual sound. Guessing. Not in their sight vocabulary. So you know they don't know that's that word. You know. Now, they talk about the tower test here. The tower test, I'm going to post a video on what the tower test is, but the tower test is not used in our school district. So I don't want you to spend a lot of time on trying to learn about the tower. Just focus on dibbles, running record, past, and I station, not on that. So, the next area that I want you to look at is figure 8.2 on page 211. So, here's where we start determining where students fall. Nonsense word subtest, weak. Time words, weak. Untimed words, weak. Hypothesis, limited phonics skills and sight vocabulary due to phonological core deficit. Reading difficulty pattern, dyslexic or mixed. train phonological awareness and phonics. By now, based on the past and whatever other tests that you do, you should be able to say, okay, they did good here, they did bad here, they did good here, bad, bad, bad. This is what's wrong with them. You should be able to do it. Yes, you. Okay, so nonsense word test, time test, phonological awareness test. Those 3 I've already shown you how to do. So you need to test your student on your case study to be able to say, okay, I know what to test. I know based on these tests what this kid's issue is. So I'm going to do my 20 interventions on this. This chart is telling you what you need to do. So your test results will give you a hypothesis. Your hypothesis will give you the issue that your student has. And based on those issues, you're going to be able to find your interventions. Use this chart when you're doing your case study so you can figure out where you are at. Now, some other things. The largest factor that determines a child's fluency appears to be the size of the child's sight vocabulary. Fluency, sight vocabulary work together, okay? Their fluency will be limited if their sight word vocabulary is limited, okay? Limit. Issue, okay? Sight word vocabulary is the foundation of reading fluency. So, if they're not fluent, that means their sight word vocabulary is not good. If they're not fluent and their sight word vocabulary is not good, you have a struggling reader. If you have a struggling reader, you need to figure out where the issue is and what type of reading difficulty pattern they fall under. Once you figure out what reading difficulty pattern they fall under, you are able to determine their route of action, their intervention. Now, the book starts talking about repeated readings. I like repeated readings. One, because it works on reading fluency. It helps with their sight word vocabulary because they get to see the words and they get multiple exposure. So, repeated readings have to be chosen correctly, okay? So, if I know that Patrick is a struggling reader and I do a repeated reading on an interest that Patrick has, Patrick is a fisher. He likes to fish with his dad on the weekends. So I'm going to choose readings for him that deal with fishing. Guess what's going to happen? He's going to retain that information. So I like repeated readings. I think repeating readings are good. I think it has a place in reading intervention, especially during RTI or reading intervention time. Repeated readings to me, plus. Now, the book also says that repeated readings are good but bad. This caution box right here on page 213, there is little reason to believe that this approach will help students with poor orthographic mapping skills remember unfamiliar words. Techniques that do not promote orthographic mapping have limited value in promoting fluency. I kind of disagree. I think repeated readings are good if they are taught with something else. So, take our closed read, for example, which is a repeated read. If we do vocabulary one day, comprehension the next day, maybe chronological order the next day, and they are seeing it multiple times, I think repeated readings are okay. I just don't think they could stand alone, and I think that's what Kilpatrick is getting at. Fluency test. They talk about the sentence fluency, some other tests that you are not going to need to know, and then passage fluency. Passage fluency is giving them a passage. They read it, kind of like a running record. I like those. I think it gives me a pretty good picture of what's wrong with the student. So I don't think that passage fluencies are bad. as long as the student doesn't get overwhelmed. Okay, so I think passage fluency is okay if you put it on their grade level or just a grade level above. So if they're at a Lexile 20 and you give them a 21 and they get frustrated, stop. But I think you could build them to that level. So I like passage fluency. Sentence fluency, I think, is it doesn't give us enough information. I also think that when we're talking about testing word identification and fluency, this is where your mix and your compensator come in, because your compensator will kind of surprise you, and they may be good at one of these but not both of these. Your mix may be bad at both of them, but your compensator may be fluent or have good intonation but still struggle with word identification. So you have to really focus when you're assessing them on word identification and fluency to figure out exactly what the issue is. I like the chart on page 219 that talks about word identification and fluency. Have to time them. You have to time them. You have to assess them on both areas. One area does not stand alone. Compensators can sound fluent, but their fluent sound comes with a struggle. So they're not going to be as fast, and that's why we time them, so we know we have to work with them. Your compensator may sound fluent, but it's going to take them a little bit. So be aware of that. Other major things that I want you to know about in this chapter. Understand that just because they're fluent doesn't mean that they're a great reader. Think of your hyperlexic. Think of my oldest daughter, Isabella, is a hyperlexic. She can read and read and read, but when you ask her, she has no idea what she's reading about. So again, one of these tests does not stand alone. Issues with passage fluency and sentence fluency. Sentence fluency, it's too short. Passage fluency, they can't tell you why they're a poor reader. You need to have a full picture and multiple subtests to be able to understand what the child's issue is. And again, if at all you can understand when you're testing fluency and you're testing word identification, test them. Other than that, I am going to post a video of the tower test so you can see it, but really focus on the tests that I've given you. Those are the ones you're going to use. I'm going to try to see if I can get a sample eye station test so you can see what that looks like, but other than that, those are the key components in this chapter, okay?